this group, 22SQ, it was interesting how I discovered them. I had an office slash studio in the Salamanca Arts Center, and I was minding my own business, just working, and suddenly I heard this beautiful sound, and I couldn't quite identify it. It took a few minutes, and then I realized it was saxophones. I didn't recognize it at first because they were perfectly in tune.
Asked me to do a piece with them, and they had a funny idea. They said, look, why don't you do a piece that can be both a concerto with an orchestra and we can play it by ourselves. And I said, okay, I agreed to do that, but I actually didn't know how to do it. Should I write the concerto for orchestra first, and then, or should I write it for the quartet and then make it to a concerto? So I did the latter. I did it as, I wrote a piece, but what I did is, you may have noticed, or maybe, I hope you did, maybe you didn't, it doesn't really matter. Each movement features one of the four players. So the first is the high saxophone, the soprano saxophone. The second one is the baritone, the low one, and then there's the tenor, and then there's the soprano at the end. Movement featuring one of the players, and then I had the other three would play the parts that would eventually become the orchestra parts. So that it kind of made it possible after I finished that part to then just orchestrate the other parts, but then I left quartet parts for them to play as well. To school. I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, but I went to school in Chicago where there was a lot of good jazz playing, and I went to school there in the 50s. So I did hear, I heard Sonny Rollins and Coltrane more. I heard him more in New York, and then after that, Ornette Coleman and Pharoah Sanders, and so the saxophone. Now I was a flutist also.
Yes.
So
I was going to get to that.
Yeah, you didn't get that. But the trouble with the flute is I don't play in any key that they play in. So there's not much music for flute and saxophone, to be truthful. When you write for saxophone, you're writing in B flat and E flat. When you're writing for flute, you're writing in C. So as a kid, I had a friend who played clarinet, and we had a hell of a time trying to play duets together, because we couldn't decide who would be the transposing person. So, but I felt at home with the saxophone has the sound of it, if you grow up with it the way, and I think it's pretty much a global thing now. It's not just I mean, we all grow up listening to the saxophone, and I was surprised when I went to live in Europe in the 60s to find out that the Scandinavians have such a tradition of saxophone playing, which I wasn't aware of until I got there. But a lot of that is based on the sound that was developed in America. Don't forget, Sidney Bechet lived most of his life in Paris. He was a great saxophonist and clarinetist. forget does it say when I wrote it? I think I wrote it in the early 1990s, maybe. It's not been around for a while. But I remember now that each movement had a specific sound to me. The first one, I was thinking of a beautiful melody by Glazunov that I had remembered. Now, I couldn't remember the melody, but I remember the feeling of it. And so the first one has that sound to it. The second one, I was thinking about an American baritone sax player named Gary Mulligan. And I was thinking about the way he sounded, and I wrote that piece for him in a certain way. I didn't know him. I'd never known him, but I knew his music very well. The third one is the tenor saxophone, and I just wrote a melody that I thought would be, that would go with an instrument. And the fourth one, I thought of it as a Tom and Jerry cartoon. If you think of it that way, all that's missing is someone to make the cartoon. You can figure out it's like Tom and Jerry are just running after each other and running around. So that's what it was. I don't know a lot about the classical saxophone playing. There are some very well-known concertos, but they haven't. The quartet literature for saxophone hasn't become famous the way the string quartet literature has got famous. And it's funny because we think of string quartets. The only other quartet of instruments that has a literature is a saxophone. There are no flute quartets, or there aren't even really brass quartets like brass quintets and sextets and octets, but a brass quartet is actually fairly rare too. The idea of emulating the classical literature with a literature for saxophone is a kind of a novel idea. I think it's probably you come across it in Europe and America a lot, especially America, because we grow up listening to jazz music. That's what we like, and that's what Americans think that they invented it. The Europeans think they invented it. The Africans think they invented it. So, for all I know, it could have been made in Tanzania, for all I know. Just the way I'd hoped I'd hear it someday, so that was good. I said, oh yeah, I did that. So thank you. And before we came out, and I said to them, okay, put on your counting shoes and take a deep breath.